15%, somewhere like that, and it's getting worse. So we got a lot more people. In some ways, it's not as bad as it looks because the ones in black, we use a lot more resources. So we're kind of keeping ourselves kind of steady. That's probably helpful. It's mostly, this blue is Asia and this red is Africa. So most of the population growth is in the poorest countries, but also the ones that are most food insecure. Latin America is expanding some, but if you look at these other bars, from 50 to 2000, projected to 2025, they're pretty parallel. So our population isn't growing a lot in the developed world. It's in Asia and Africa. If you look at birth rates, or the birth dearth, as this one says, it's going down worldwide. It's not just in developed countries. United States, Europe, Japan, developed countries, if it's less than 2.1 births per woman, we're below replacement rate. And in fact, in the United States, our population in the United States would be going down if we had no immigration. Most of the growth in the population is immigration, more than half. Because within the United States, our birth rate is less than 2.1. In the developing world, if it gets down to 2.5 or 3.3, so somewhere in here, then the population goes down. And so it's happening worldwide. It's just we have a lot of momentum in the other direction. So population will continue to increase for another 50 or 60 years, and then it'll start to go down. And what's the number one thing that's correlated with? There's two things that are strongly correlated with the drop in population, which is the number one thing. Educated women. Okay. So one is socioeconomic status. The socioeconomic status, as GNP goes up, birth rates drop. But the biggest correlation is if you educate women and women have more rights, not can identify with it, but how many women say, oh yeah, I want to have 6 kids versus 2 kids. So the birth rate goes down dramatically when women get more rights and get educated. And so when you look at the countries where it's not happening, where the birth rate is not going down, almost guaranteed those are countries where women are not being educated, where in fact it's just the opposite. Women are being discouraged from being educated. United States, as I said, most of our growth is from immigration. And we're at 300 million, give or take, now, and projected to be over 400 million in 40 years. So, one thing I want to mention is organic farming, because it's controversial and there's very strong proponents and opponents. One of which who just passed away recently, Norman Borlaug, who was the father of the Green Revolution. We aren't going to feed 6 billion people with organic fertilizer. And he got a standing ovation at the ag conference he was at when he made this statement. He didn't exactly say how we're going to feed 6 billion people with fertilizer we can't make because we don't have enough energy. But now, and part of the issue, a lot of the issue with organic is the old issue of yield. Well, we can't feed that many people with organic because it just doesn't produce as much food. Now, it has a lot less inputs, so output versus input, it's pretty good. But and most of the studies show around the 20% lower yield. Well, that's pretty serious if we're trying to feed more people. But in developing countries, the yield is actually higher with organic than with fertilizer and pesticides, in large part because they can't afford to use as much fertilizer and pesticides and irrigation as they need to maximize the crop, and so the organic they can take advantage of. And if it's less than ideal conditions, okay, and because organic improves the soil, it's better able to withstand drought, it's better able to withstand high rainfall. So yes, it's 20% lower, but a lot of the times it's a lot closer than 20%. The other thing, if you happen to be looking at the literature, you have to be careful how they define organic. When a farm transitions from conventional to organic, there's a 3 to 5 year transition, and the yields drop dramatically because the soil's not very good and they can't use fertilizer to prop it up. But after the soil is improved, then you see the yields start to come back up. So if you're going to compare organic to conventional, you have to compare an established organic production system, not a transitional organic production system. Mine looks fine. Let me see. Oh, FAO, they came out. How are we going to address world hunger? They have a policy statement. We should favor organic in the third world. But that is going to give us more bang for our bucks than conventional. Mainly because it's not as fossil fuel dependent. It uses locally available resources, manure, green crops, rather than bringing in pesticides and fertilizers from outside. And the ecological stresses are a lot less. Just remind you, this is Don Thilmany's slide I borrowed from her too. Organic is continuing to grow at about 10 to 20% a year. It's been sustained. And in spite of that, in spite of all the press, really organic is still only about 4%. And even more kind of surprising, I think, is that most of our organic, or at least half of it, is imported. So our demand for organic in this country far exceeds the ability of American farmers to supply it. We don't have enough farmers transitioning for various reasons. So imported organic from Europe, I'd buy that. Imported organic from some country. Imported organic from China. I don't know. I think maybe not. So the organic here is well regulated. You start getting further removed, it's regulated, but it's not as tightly regulated. Now, I mentioned I'm going to talk to you about the dilution effect. And by the way, there's very little evidence that organic is more nutritious. It's probably got more antioxidants. It's probably not more nutritious if you control the cultivar. Okay? The cultivar makes a much bigger difference on nutritional content than the way the food is grown. But there is some logic to why organic might be more nutritious. One is that there's an environmental dilution effect. If you have plants that grow fast, which synthetic fertilizer causes, they don't have as much time to uptake the nutrients. Okay, so that'd be one argument. That the plant's putting more energy into growth than uptaking nutrients. I think the bigger issue, but certainly interrelated, is the genetic issue. High yield crops, we pick crops that give us a lot of yield, but that means they grow fast. And the ones that grow fast tend to have less nutrients than the ones that grow slow. So that's one argument. Fast-growing plants, which we tend to pick, don't trap as much nutrients. And then there's a stress argument. We don't have pesticides, so that means the plant has to mount its own defenses. A lot of those defenses tend to be antioxidants and phytochemicals, and so the organic would have more because it's mounting its own defenses. But just to be fair, to point out that some of those defenses are also toxic. So some of them may benefit us and some may not. Okay, I lied, we got one more. You may not feel any healthier right away, but you'll definitely feel more smart. Actually, I'll make the point when we get to local. So I told Wendy I had one of her slides. This is one of her, from Colorado Proud. Reasons to buy local. Seasonal diversity, you get stuff fresh, it's fuel to fridge, savor to flavor. Support the local economy, I think it's huge. We keep farmers in business. Preserve our heritage, invest in the future, preserve open space and wildlife. As I said before, earlier when I was talking to Wendy, when I moved here 20 years ago from Pennsylvania, the drive from Fort Collins to Denver was all farmland. It's all farmland. Now it's a little bit, but it's got the for sale signs. I'm not sure where we're going to grow our food, but we're certainly making it a little more challenging. So characteristic of local food system, does it say fossil fuel? Yeah, I suspect not. Is it greater variety? Yes. More flavor? It's right, yes. And I think more nutritious. Partly because it's picked ripe, it's not picked 2 weeks ahead of time and then shipped across the country and then gassed to make it look like it's right, but also because of cultivars. And Wolf Moon Farm, Karen from Wolf Moon Farm, I think is either on the program or else she certainly has a booth out there. If you're going to the farmer's market, they just picked it. It's ripe. And the riper it is, the more nutritious it is. I mean, the stuff you get in the supermarket can be weeks old, and it's not picked right. So I think local is more nutritious.